Battle of Najaf. The day al-Sadr turned into a genie that America was unable to kill. What happened? Here in this largest cemetery in the world, it was home to the most violent confrontations of the Battle of Najaf. The great cemetery of Wadi al-Salam carried everything at the time except its name. 6 million bodies in the cemeteries underground were martyred, thousands of killed, fell in huge military operations, most of which took place above the Lahoud, among the armed with the Iraqi Mahdi Army and the strongest American army in the world. But the surprise was greater than that the Americans could bear. What happened in the Battle of Najaf al-Akbar? And how did al-Sadr carry out its operations? And what is the role of the Sistani? Al-Mahdis. After the American invasion of Iraq and the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime in May of 2003, the young Shia religious man, Muqtada Al-Sadr, did not have much of the United States before he established a religious political movement in the name of Al-Tayyar al-Sadri. Within months, he was able to mobilize his supporters to take to the streets protests against the American occupation and the appointment of Paul Bremer as the American ruler of Iraq. To begin the American army's attempt to liquidate Al-Tayyar al-Sadri and his appointment with al-Mahdi. Al-Sadr himself was forced to form a military wing of his political movement, the birth of what he called the Al-Mahdi Army in June of the year 2003, when he called for Al-Sadr to carry weapons in the face of the American repression of his supporters' protests. He immediately joined the ranks of the Al-Mahdi Army, thousands of young men from the Shia sect in the central and south of Iraq. Despite the continuation of the American army's attempt to purge or arrest Sadr, especially after accusing him of assassinating the scholar of the religion, Shia Abdul Majid al-Khuni. However, the real battles between the army of al-Mahdi belonging to Sadr and the American army did not begin until the 4th of April of the year 2004 with the issuance of the American civilian ruler, Paul Bremer's decision to close the weekly newspaper following the Sadri movement, accusing the incitement to the attack of the Allied forces and publishing false news, what led to Sadr's supporters coming out with protests from Baghdad and other cities. The American response was to suppress the protests and launch a fire on them, in addition to expanding the house of Muqtada Al-Sadr and arresting one of his assistants, to escalate the situation and expand the range of protests and demonstrations, which witnessed the killing and injury of more than 160 protesters. Al-Sadr is alive or dead. With the spread of the demonstrations, the decision of Sadr was a military operation against the Al-Mahdi, the Spanish forces based in Al-Andalus. The operation consisted of the killing and injury of 13 Salvadoran and Spanish soldiers, and with the attempt of the Allied forces to respond to the operation in a limited framework, the surprise was that the attack was only an hour to launch armed confrontations in Al-Mahdi and the Allied forces in most of the cities of the middle and south of Iraq. However, the fighting took place in the city of Najaf, where Al-Sadr announced his arrest in the Mosque of the Kufa in the east of the city, as the American forces announced their determination to arrest him and consider him out of the law, to become the main center of support for the Al-Mahdi army with the continuation of the battles in the city of Najaf, which Al-Sadr's men succeeded in control of most of them, and forcing the American forces to retreat to the borders of the city. Before new instructions reached the American forces, which included that the mission of the American army now was either to kill Al-Sadr and arrest him, or to return without one of the two. While Al-Sadr's response to the call of his supporters to continue fighting, even if he was killed or arrested, to continue the clashes and spread to include all parts of Najaf and Kufa, where the Al-Mahdi's armed forces relied on the tactics of gang warfare, which forced the Allied forces to retreat before Al-Sadr surprised the Spanish forces with, as the American forces fell in a fierce clash on the outskirts of the Kufa coast and Theold city in Najaf. This was followed by the attack of the American army, which is located in the Najaf Sea area. The bloody battle did not stop on the outskirts of the old city and the cemetery of Wadi al-Salam and the outskirts of the city of Kufa until the American army on the 27th of May stopped its operations in Najaf, within a treaty agreed by the United States to withdraw from the old city, while the Spanish forces had already withdrawn in the late April. The treaty signed between al-Sadr and the American forces did not succeed in stopping the clashes in the outskirts of Najaf, Wadi al-Salam, and Kufa. Despite the surrender of the American security file in the city to the Iraqi police, a section of the American forces advanced on the 5th of August of the year 2004 to overtake the house of al-Sadr in Najaf. The fire began with the fighters of the Al-Mahdi Army, which led to the killing of 2 of the Al-Mahdi Army, in addition to the civilians. With the approach of the American Marines from the invasion of al-Sadr and the capture of it, the fighters of the Al-Mahdi Army struck a siege around the American forces, which fell into a new trap from the plan of al-Sadr. After bloody clashes, most of the American forces were killed and wounded, while other American forces were trying to invade the city using tanks and the following day, the 6th of August, the Iraqi army announced the drop of an American missile and the killing and injury of 7 soldiers in separate attacks on the rocket bombs in the Wadi al-Salam cemetery and the Revolution Square in the middle of Najaf. At a time when thousands of volunteers in the Al-Mahdi army flocked from various cities in Iraq to participate in violent fighting in Najaf. After days of bloody clashes, especially on the 12th of August of the year 2004, a new American operation failed to kill al-Sadr, or his arrest, where a force of American naval fighters supported by al-Sadr, but it was empty. After shelling the area of the house with F-16 aircraft bombs, al-Sadr appeared from inside the Imam Ali cemetery in the middle of the city, calling for continued fighting, despite his injury to several wounds. The fight continued between the two sides, especially in the Wadi al-Salam cemetery, where the American army used planes to bomb the cemeteries that were besieged by the fighters of the Al-Mahdi army. In addition to the daily bombardment of all parts of the city of Najaf, which left a great destruction, and with the continuation of the endurance of the al-Sadr forces inside Najaf and the siege of the American forces by the fighters of the Al-Mahdi army in the Al-Haidari Plate, the Shiite religious reference Al-Sistani to Iraq. To be in the 27th of August, the declaration of a ceasefire and the cessation of firing between the Al-Mahdi army and the American forces, where the agreement was made to withdraw the American forces from Najaf and Kufa, and to hand over the security in it to the Iraqi police, after the declaration of the al-Sadr leader who agreed to the conditions set by Al-Sistani. And on the 28th of August, the keys were handed over to the Al-Haidari Plate to the representative of Al-Sistani, before the Al-Mahdi army announced the withdrawal of its elements and the complete cessation of firing, in which the American forces withdrew from Najaf and Kufa. And you, in your opinion, why did the strongest army in the world fail to neutralize al-Sadr and kill him or arrest him, even though he was only a few meters away?